Welcome back to Frank Factualities, the podcast. I am your host, Yolanda. Thank you for joining me for another episode this week. Glad to have you all. What has been going on? I hope all is well. I am doing well this week. It's been a lot going on in the world. First and foremost, welcome back to Frank Factualities, the podcast. I am your host, Yolanda. Thank you for joining me for another episode this week. Glad to have you all. What has been going on? I hope all is well. I am doing well this week. It's been a lot going on in the world. First and foremost, I would like to say rest in peace to Tyree Nichols. That situation has been across the news, and it is definitely heartbreaking. And I pray that we can get justice in that situation. And I think his funeral was today, so definitely send prayers up for his family, friends, and the close people around him. Uplift them with what they're dealing with. On a lighter note, it is Black History Month, so happy Black History Month to all of us Black folk. I hope that you find some way to honor our ancestors during this time. As far as street talk goes, I want to ask you all, did you see that story where the young lady was fighting her teacher and the teacher's leg was broke, or the teacher broke her leg in the fight? And also I think it was a 22-year-old coach that pretended to be I'm going to say like 14 maybe, because she was playing in a JV game, a junior varsity basketball game. So she was filling in for a student that was absent. So she pretended to be an adolescent. Or that other lady who was 29 and enrolled in a high school for 4 days and pretended to be a freshman. What is going on in our education system? It is a lot with just those three things. I felt really bad for that teacher. If you saw the video, the girl was clearly all up in her face. What I can say from witnessing those things, I personally have not been involved in that type of situation. I am on the positive side of education, I would say. I'm not a disciplinarian. So I am blessed to be at a school that my administrative staff feels like, well, the kids have to have somebody to go to if they need to talk or they're dealing with something. And if we put our counselors in the role of an administrator, then who do the kids go to when they're having issues and they want to be able to trust someone? So I'm very grateful for that. So never in any circumstance am I in a position of a disciplinarian at the school. So I don't ever tell the kids no, if that makes sense. So they're never angry at me. I'm never talking to them because of something that they did wrong. And even if I need to investigate a situation or find out what happens, it's never from a place of judgment or from a place of something bad is going to happen. And like all of us counselors, school counselors say when they come in our office, okay, whatever you say in this office stays between us, unless you're going to harm yourself or someone else. And then in that case, we have to tell someone. So the kids feel really safe. So I don't know what that's like to have. Of course, I've had kids angry with me and, have an attitude about something that I'm saying, especially if I'm just being stern with them about the expectations when it comes to academics, for sure, because I don't just do personal social things. We do have to do some academic counseling as well. And that's when sometimes it gets a little tense, like, okay, you need this and you got to get on the ball because you've been slacking a bit and this is where it stands. And, I got to call your parents and I have to tell them what's going on because the expectation is that you come out and you graduate on time, but this isn't what's going on. And so sometimes they get a little testy, but long and short, I just don't know what I would do in that situation. And so for a lot of speculation to be like, if that were me, I would have done X, Y, Z. You never know what you would do in a situation. And obviously on any job, because we all have one, that there are, repercussions for things that you do, things you can and cannot do. You couldn't just cuss the customer out if they came and said something nasty. So imagine the policy and procedure when it comes to children. So there's really not a lot that can be done, but because we are human, then obviously that those type of things can test us. So prayers go out to her because she broke her leg. That's a serious thing. I don't know how I would be able to even go back to that school if something like that were to happen to me. But with all of those things going, to kind of jumpstart into what the topic is of the day, is really the decline in education. And that situation is a prime example of why people aren't getting into education. Number one, there's been a decline in higher education, period. There's just not a lot of kids, or students, I should call them, going into higher education. So they're graduating, but they're not going to four-year colleges for sure. More so two-year colleges. And a lot of times they just want to get training so that they can do the jobs that they want. Now, I know that in every state and in every school, there's a push on a certain thing. And the state of South Carolina is college and career ready. So everything is based on that. Are we preparing the students to be college and career ready? Our state pays for them to take SAT, ACT, and then we've also paid for WIN and or work keys. And those kids take it their third year in high school, which is equivalent to their junior year. But we say third year in high school because some kids could be in the 10th grade still, and that still be their third year in high school if they failed a grade. So that's why it's said that way. But either way, every school or district has their focus. Okay, it could be work-based learning, all those different things. And that is, I don't want to say it's old school because it's not, but every individual counselor, which you shouldn't be biased and have your own views and opinions. But what I tell a kid is, let's talk about what you want to do. That's number one. And based on what they tell me they want to do will dictate to me what they need to do after high school. Because if you're telling me that you want to be a real estate agent, then I'm not going to recommend that you go to college. What I tell my students to do is do a reverse job search on what it is that you want to do. Like real estate agents wanted. Like you check the wanted ads, like you're looking for a job. And then you look at the requirements. And if the requirements say that you need to have completed this real estate school for 2 months and whatever, and you find out the program is 2 months, then that's what you should do. But if it doesn't require you to get a 4-year degree, then why do it? Because the purpose of going to college is to get a good job, or a career, I should say. So if your career doesn't require you to get a degree, then why get it? I've said this before, I will say it again. I feel like college is the biggest Ponzi scheme. I don't know if you guys watch Bill Maher. He was actually just saying that the other night, that he felt like college is a ripoff. And I'm saying that as somebody who's gone to college. I've said this again, and I'll say it about my own job. I don't think that my job required me to go to college. Now, maybe it can require you to have a 4-year college degree, only because it deals with so much education that you may need to have an advanced level degree just to understand the nuances of trying to advise a kid how to go to college. So maybe a bachelor's degree, but I needed a master's to do my job, and definitely don't think that I needed that to do the job that I needed. Honestly, I could have gotten a 2-month training and been able to do the things that I'm doing now. I'm just being honest. So I think that what the pandemic has taught us is that a lot of things need to be, or should be, readjusted and looked at. Because if we can make the adjustments that we've made for the pandemic with shutting down everything, including education, I think that we need to revamp things. Now, I want you all to think about this. There's a lot of things that have evolved over the years as far as just like what we do in society, and technology is one of those things. I am of an era where computers didn't exist. I remember doing a report and having to call around and see who had the J encyclopedia so that I could do my project on whatever it was that I knew was in the J part. And I didn't have the J because we just pieced together whatever encyclopedias we could get. So now you're talking about your computer is on your phone. That's just something that didn't exist. Nothing about education has changed really. I mean, some things, but it's still the same for the majority, brick and mortar. Yes, there are online schools, and that's the part that has changed. But as far as how we teach and what we teach and the curriculums, a lot of that just hasn't changed. So as a whole, I think there's so many other things that we should be focused on, and educating our kids are one of them. So not just the decline again in people wanting to go to school, but the interest of our kids. I don't even have to talk about my job because I have a child who is an 8th grader. And what I can tell you is that he lost his whole interest. He went from being an AB honor roll student in elementary school to the minute he got to middle school, which was his first year, completely virtual. He had no interest. When I say none, I mean zero. You guys know this. We've seen the videos. The kids are laying in bed on the computer. They are asleep and just have the laptop open. They just had no interest in it at all. Student achievement really declined during the pandemic. So that was the first time my son got C's. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, just because, and trust me, he could have gotten better, but he didn't have any type of get up and go. And I still had to work. His father had to work. So it wasn't like we were there to just be on him. And what we didn't want to do was interfere in that process. I understand some parents may have been inclined to do the work for their children. I'm not one of those parents. Okay. I've already, gone to school, and I want my kids to me, that's the bare minimum. I need you to be able to graduate high school. Outside of that, we can discuss, but high school or, completing K through 12 is a non-negotiable. So now he's getting back acclimated to how things were, but it took a minute. Even last year was, he may have started to get AB honor roll the last quarter of his 7th grade year. And this year we've been on a better track. We've had 2 quarters, both AB honor roll. But at the end of the day, it's a constant struggle. And it's not just, I can't blame parents for it. Like I said, they've just gotten comfortable of not going to school and it being okay. So they just got comfortable with just, okay, I could just do these little bit of assignments and it'd be okay. The interest in learning something is just not there. It's just like, I'm doing this because y'all say I have to do it, but just wanting to learn about different things is not. A pet peeve of mine in high school, at least in South Carolina, I'm only speaking of South Carolina. I know that different states have different graduation requirements, but here students are required to get 24 credits. And those 24 credits are broken down by subject. So it would be 4 English, 4 math, 3 science, 3 social studies, a PE, a computer science, a foreign language or vocational course, and 7 electives. Now, I didn't go into detail, but you get the point. And all of those equal to the 24. However, depending on your school schedule, kids are going to graduate with more than 24 credits. 24 is just a bare minimum. The state is saying, hey, if you're going to be in high school, you got to get at least these things in order for you to earn a diploma. But we, as a society, have gotten so complacent that once we check those things off, why am I here? And that's what we hear. We don't just hear that from kids. The parents echo the same thing. Well, he already got his credits. She already got her credits. Why she got to come? Because it's public education, because it's education in general, and the law requires you to send your child to school. We're not college where you could just say, well, I'm going to just take 2 classes in the morning and I'm going to just go to school part-time, and I'm not school, especially the state is saying, hey, if you're going to be in high school, you got to get at least these things in order for you to earn a diploma. But we, as a society, have gotten so complacent that once we check those things off, why am I here? And that's what we hear. We don't just hear that from kids. The parents echo the same thing. Well, he already got his credits. She already got her credits. Why she got to come? Because it's public education, because it's education in general, and the law requires you to send your child to school. We're not college where you could just say, well, I'm going to just take 2 classes in the morning and I'm going to just go to school part-time, and I'm not school, especially public school. And I only work in a public education. This is my only knowledge. I'm no expert, as I like to tell you all the time. But what I can tell you is public schools is funded by the state, of course. And in order for you to get funding, students have to be enrolled in school full time. So no, the schools can't afford for you to say, well, I only want my kids to go to school for 2 classes because that's all they need. It just doesn't work like that. But I don't know why people act like they don't know that. You got a job too, and there are rules and regulations that go with that so that you guys can be up to code, up to, protocol can be on point. There are certain things you got to check off to say, okay, are we doing what's required of us? But for whatever reason in education, I think people feel like because it's their children, then they get some sort of grace over anything just because they're their kids. But again, every job has rules and regulations. We're just there to do what we're supposed to do and what rules have been given to us. So it's no such thing as I don't need a class. The idea of students wanting to learn something to better themselves doesn't exist. So now I can have a kid that says, I want to go into the military. Then I'll say, okay, we have our JROTC courses. Oh, I don't want to take that. I'm sorry, run that by me one more time. Why not? Because it just gives you and say this, and that's real. Here in our state, if it is a semester course, say it's a 90-day semester, you are allowed 5 unexcused days, meaning the kid needs to come to school 80 days out of those 90. If the kid only comes to school 50 out of the 90 days or 80 days, that's required, then they have automatically failed due to attendance, regardless of what their grade is. A kid could have a 100, and if they've only been to school 50 days out of the 80, then they failed. So now you have to try to make that time up. And in some cases, kids miss so many days that the month that's allowed to make it up is not enough time for a kid to make up how many days they've missed. So now kids are failing just because they're not coming to school. That's the issue that we're dealing with now. They're failing because they're not coming to school. So how do we fix that? I get it. Some parents leave before the kids, but we got to get a handle on certain things. And I know our priorities may be different. As the older kids get, their focus is working. I've seen it to where jobs are now calling kids on their phones saying, hey, I need you to come to work. Now, they know these are high school kids, but they're calling them like, hey, I need you to come to work. And it's getting really bad because it's like high school comes first. You got to graduate. And the kids are like, well, I need my money. I get it. But maybe you don't get it. That McDonald's money is not going to make you a sufficient adult. Like, you're not going to be able to take care of yourself on your own with your McDonald's check. So if you're sacrificing your education for it, although I don't believe in post-secondary in the sense of that it's the end all be all, what I'm saying is that the high school diploma is the bare minimum. Every job says you need to have graduated from high school. Of course, not your McDonald's, because you have gotten hired under the umbrella of being a teenager in high school. And they'll keep you hired there if you've been there for a while. But the minute you want to elevate, the minute you want to be supervisor, the minute you want to be manager, they're going to do a background check and they're going to want those credentials because it's going to require you to be at least a high school graduate. And when you're not, then they're going to give it to somebody else. And you're going to feel some type of way because you sacrificed all that time taking off school to come be there for those people. And then you didn't get what you need. You understand what I'm saying? So I think it's important for us to just reiterate to those kids that K-12 is the bare minimum. You have got to get your high school diploma. Now, I believe in you. That's the bare minimum because that's your job as a child. You shouldn't have it. I mean, you can have other jobs. I'm not against that. But what I'm saying is your main job is your education. K through 12, you got to get that. It's a non-negotiable. And I agree. Half of the stuff that kids are being taught may not even be nothing that they need, because we hear that all the time. I don't even need this stuff. I don't need this stuff. You don't until you do. But at the end of the day, you need to know a little bit about a lot. That's how I feel, because you just never know what type of job you're going to have. You never know what your life is going to lead you. And you just want to have a base knowledge of just a lot of things. So I'm sorry, y'all. I forgot to plug in my speaker, so I hope that sounded okay, because I don't really know, so that's my fault. So anyway, because of that's just from the student's perspective as far as the decline in that. Let's look at it from the teachers. So I had a child who wanted to just change their schedule, and we were going through with the parents like, these are the classes we offer, blah 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 blah. And I just remember saying, okay, we don't have a teacher. So, we don't have that offer. It's only one section of it, blah, 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 blah. And the parent was just like, why don't y'all have any teachers? Like, why is it? And the kids were asking the same thing, because there was a few, the student was in there and she had her mom on speaker, and there was her cousin was in there with them. And I just told them no one's getting into education. So even the few kids that are going into post-secondary are going into higher education. They're not majoring in education. Education has become a fallback job. It's like, okay, well, I went to school for engineering. I went for biology. I went for whatever, and I haven't found a job. So let me just teach. Like, that's what it's becoming. And now, of course, those people don't want to be there. So when they get there, they're not lasting. We've seen so many teachers, like, the middle of the year just stop because they're like, okay, I don't want to do this. I can't. And obviously, videos like I just mentioned of teachers getting beat up or hurt or just school shootings or whatever, all of those things come into factor and why people don't want to get into it. So how can we make education exciting? We have courses in education at our school that we offer, and I can tell you enrollment is down, and I don't mean down, I mean low, like flow rider low. They're not interested. And when they are, they're going into elementary. I mean, I don't know how many people say, yeah, I want to teach at a high school. You have a lot of males that want to coach. And of course, to coach, sometimes you need to get into education. So they're doing it that. A lot of people want to get into administration. But sometimes at schools, you got to crawl before you walk. Nobody's hiring an administrator who hadn't, either been a counselor or some sort of teacher at some point. They want to see that you've been in there so you can get all the education you want, but you got to do a little crawl. And I'm sorry, I just need to get on my rant for a second. Just about that in particular. I worked in the private sector for a long time before I got into education, and I just noticed immediately how different things were. I hate the fact that we all claim that education doesn't pay any money. We don't get paid a lot, right? And everybody knows this. Yet education is the only place that I know of that makes you get another degree before you can even get a promotion. You got to go back to school, only to not make the amount of money that you just borrowed, because you're probably going to have to borrow money at this point to get another master's degree just so that you can be in administration. I already got, and we're going to use me as an example. I already have a master's plus 30. The plus 30 is just, in case those of you don't know, because I got into counselor education, additional hours over what you would need to just get your plain master's, because I'm doing all levels of education. So that gave me 30 additional hours over the master's. So when you're getting paid in education, they base your salary off of, at least here, I don't know where everybody else is doing, but it's based on your years of experience and your degree level. So the highest, of course, is PhD or EDD. The master's plus 30 is right under that. And then it's a master's, and then it's a bachelor's, and then, after that, that's certified staff, because certified meaning you got, again, certified in a certain area, mathematics. Again, for me, it's counselor education. You can have non-certified staff, or what we call classified staff, but that's another story. I don't know their pay scale. That's on something different. So anyway, in order for me as a counselor, if I decided, you know what, I want to be an assistant principal, I got to go back to school to get a master's degree. Even though I've been in education for a long time, even though I may have the experience, even though my principal or my district may feel like I'm worthy and I can do the job, it's going to require me to get that. You get what I'm saying? And Lord forbid, if you want respect in education, everybody feels like you got to be doctor or something. No shade to people, because, if that's your goal and you've always wanted to get your EDD, then that's fine. But I don't feel like you don't know enough, or people shouldn't look at you as if you're an expert in your area if you don't have this EDD degree. I just don't agree with that. And I'm sorry, I am not going back to get a second master's. I don't care. I think that's the dumbest thing. I'm not doing it. Number one, I don't want to be in administration. That's number one. But the idea that I got to go back and get another degree, and I looked at it. At the time I looked, because I looked maybe like 3-4 years ago. I haven't looked recently. If I go back and get a PhD or EDD, I would have probably spent 60 G's or more, depending on what the degree program, what school I went to, and what the tuition was for those 2 years. I don't know. I could be jacking the price up. Either way, I would have only gotten $3,000 more a year to just get another bachelor's degree. That little $3,000 a year going to end up being what? About $20-something on my check twice a month. Like, it just isn't worth it just for people to be like, oh, you got another degree. I'm just not that girl. Like I tell my kids when they come to me, I went to college because I had to go to college. What I wanted to do as a career required me to get a master's degree. So that's what I did. I did not want to go to college, but it required it. So I do what I have to do what I want to do. And that's what I tell my students. Do what you have to do so that you can do what you want to do. So that's why I went. But because I don't want to be in any type of administrative role, why would I go back and get that? I know my dad is like, oh, you want to get your PhD? No, for what? There's nothing that I want to do that is going to require that from me. Eventually, I want to be a motivational speaker. Eventually, I want to be on panels, and I want people to invite me to talk about, important issues, whichever issues that is that they think that I would be great at speaking about. That's what I want to do. That doesn't require me to to get another degree. What it requires me is to work on my craft right here on this podcast as I'm doing. So I've gone through more in my life than just teen pregnancy, but I think that a lot of people like to pinpoint me for that. As I tell people, that wasn't the worst thing that happened to me in my life. Definitely traumatic for sure. But homelessness was probably the worst thing. That was something I don't wish on my worst enemy. And I don't have any enemies, but if I did, that I wouldn't wish that on anybody. That's just something that no one should have to experience ever in life. But I say all that to say I wouldn't go back to school. I don't think that it is something so I get it as far as why the decline is there, because even me, I'm not looking at going back, but I think something has to change within education for it to be back popping. So that means that, number one, for teachers, for us to have more teachers, then we got to pay more. The money has to be there. And although everybody gets a step increase is what we call it every year, your pay goes up, it's definitely not enough. I would never make enough money to pay back the amount of loans that I have just to get my degree, because I'm coming fresh out of high school. I mean, I didn't know anything about scholarships, nothing more than what I know a whole lot more now, obviously hindsight being 2020, but I didn't know anything about that. I just knew I wanted to go to school, and that money is enticing. So you see all of this and they're like, yeah, you can get this loan, and if you get this, you get this refund check because you're going to get this money back. And I was on my own, I was on my own. Like, I had my own bills. I wanted to get my own place because I was homeless. I was living from house to house. So it was like, okay, if I get this money, then I can get my own place. And of course, having your own place comes with things, and having your own car and trying to maintain and survive, and having a child. So it was always enticing to get the max amount of loans, but that has its consequences. And trust me, I'm living those. So yes, if I knew better, then I would have done better. At the end of the day, I went back to school, obviously, after my bachelor's because I had to. So I pay attention in the polls whenever we're voting for anything that has anything to do with education, because it's near and dear to my heart, because that's the career path that I chose. However, I think that as a parent and as an advocate for children, we have to go back and instill in them why it's important, or why our education, I can't talk today, guys. Why our education is important, because they just don't see it anymore. They don't see the value, and we do our best, but this is my ploy to tell you all, as parents, if you're listening, please help our kids see the value again in education and what the importance of it is. And we have to not allow them to bring up whatever excuse they would like to. Crazy story. We actually gave our son an option. His dad didn't have to go to school, and he rides to school with his dad because, he goes to school where his dad works. And he said, well, it's Friday. You don't have to go in today if you don't want to. You can stay home just for this day. Gavin was like, no, I'm going to school. Sorry. I want to go. And I was so happy because, again, I can see now he's getting back with his peers, and he has relationships with these people, and he enjoys socializing. And I was so thrilled about that and I can tell because now even his time on the game has changed. He's not on the game as much. And when he is, he's playing with the same people he's been playing with for like years. And just to hear them laugh and catch up, like what's been going on with your life, like they talk about school and, whatever extracurricular activities they got going on. So he's moving more into how it used to be for us where, with socializing and hanging out with your friends and going to basketball games and going on field trips and just mixing up. So I think that after now that the pandemic is over and we can move back into normal activities, maybe the kids will get acclimated to being back in school and kind of being around each other. Because I know the kids tell us that, like, hey, we want more activities. It got to be a balance. You got to get the academics as well. But I hope with the president declaring that, okay, it's official, COVID shenanigans are done. So it's back to regular business now. So frankly, the fact of the matter is, let's get back to business. And that meaning we got to educate our kids. They need to know what they have to do in order to come out of school. We cannot allow them to make whatever excuses they want. We have to be on them. And it's help out there for everyone. I just had a friend that, one of my former classmates from high school reached out to me, and she wanted me to just kind of help coach her and her son because he's going to 9th grade, and she knows that I'm a school counselor. And she just wanted me to give my personal insight on what I think he should do as a freshman going in. So it's always people out there to help you if you have any questions. And I think I told you all this story, but there was a random person, I don't know her, but I think my husband knew her, and he had reached out to me at the time, and he said, hey, I see this woman online saying, and I know her, that her son wasn't going to graduate. because they gave him a class and something about a credit. And she ended up calling me, and I told her, and she thankfully was in our same state. So I had a contact person at the State Department. And I said, hey, that school can't do that, that your son can graduate, and this is what you need to tell them. Sure enough, she called me the next day and she said, I got it straightened out. He's going to graduate, which I knew it because, again, education is not complicated. Everything that you need to know is all online. There's nothing that we do that's not public information. So nowadays it's different. You don't need me to call to say, hey, what's my child's grades? It's Empower School. That's the program that we use. And guess what? What's crazy about that is, because my son has one, it looks just like mine as far as what you can see, like how you see the grade. It looks like what I look at it. So you're not seeing anything that I don't have a special thing that shows me something different. Yeah, I can see like historical, what they've done from like 9th grade on. But as far as current, you can see that. You don't have to wait on a report card anymore like we used to do. Things are just different now. So you have access on your phone in the palm of your hand to all your state policies on education, on attendance, on grading, on all of these things. All you gotta do is put it in a Google search. It's like nothing. It ain't no different from anything else you want to find out. How to make a tuna casserole. You Google it. How many credits does a child need to graduate? What's the attendance policy for a high school student in the state of Florida or whatever. It's an easy Google search and you can find out whatever you want to find out. So I promise you, I didn't touch none of what I probably wanted to touch. That was just my rant on education. I've been talking about that seemed like all week. So I just wanted to blow off some steam on here. That's it. I appreciate you guys coming in for this topic, and I'll holler at y'all, man. Bye. Till next time.